Hello everyone, my name is Asif Ahmedzai.
And my name is Nijo Joseph.
Today in this presentation we will be analyzing the South Korean film called Parasite. This 2019 Korean film Parasite explores the rising tensions in a post-miracle on the Han River, South Korea, which is a term coined by economists to describe the rapid industrialization and modernization in the last 60 years. This rapid change in the fortune-torn war nation resulted, however, in a divide between the rich and the poor that continues to grow out to this day. Uh, the film revolves around the destitute Kim family who scams the hyper-rich yet naive Park family into employing them for various domestic jobs such as tutors, art therapists, drivers, and housekeepers. Although they succeed, things take a turn for the worse when one night the Parks go for camping. The Kims celebrate in the Park mansion the spoils of their deceit, but come to realize that the previous housekeeper has been hiding her death-ridden husband in a secret bunker, whose existence is only known by the previous housekeeper and the previous owner. When the housekeeper discovers the Kim's scams, she threatens to expose them, and this sets up a physical struggle between the two families. Due to torrential rain and flooding, the Parks cannot go camping and instead return home to celebrate their young son's birthday as a garden party. This tension between the Kims and the housekeeper family and the Kims and the Parks build up and spill into violence. Class warfare is the final scene, which ends with Ki Taek stabbing Mr. Park due to his built-up resentment of the hyper-rich, and both the housekeeper and her husband are killed off, as well as Ki Jong, who is the daughter of Ki Taek. The film ends with Ki Woo, who is the son of Ki Taek, fantasizing about growing rich enough to buy the Park's mansion, under which his father has gone into hiding into a secret bunker. Well, before we move on to the subtleties and analyzing of the movie, I just want to mention like the name of this movie, Parasite. So it might seem that the poor family, i.e. the Kim or the Parasite in this case, they are leeching of the rich family. However, it's a really mutual thing in this case, because not only the poor are parasitic to the rich family, but the rich are also leeching of the poor family to their money. And like in this case, you saw that how they fired everyone in their previous workers just because they were deceived by the Kims without even asking the previous employees if they had any fault or not.
So stairs are an important motif in the movie. At a superficial level, stairs enable people to move between lower and upper levels. The movie takes this concept and emphasizes to a point. It becomes a sort of stylistic part of the setting. Parasite's production designer Lee Ha-jun goes so far as to say that the places in this film are even more compartmentalized and all connected through a very complicated staircase. In fact, there are key stairways in the movie which seamlessly interconnects from the upper floor of the Park's mansion to the semi-basement in which the Kims live, as can be seen in the pictures. Although to an extent stylistic, the stairs form part of the physical structure whereby the poor quite literally inhabit the lowest levels of the city. The stairs form part of the physical structure whereby waste and sewage produced in the urban environment quite literally has only one way to go, down. As seen in the movie, when sudden torrential rains arrive, it affects the two families in a starkly different manner. The wealthy Parks have their camping trip postponed, whereas the Kims must salvage their belongings after their semi-basement home is flooded by sewage water. It shows how the physical structure affects how the wealthy and poor experience climate change differentially. To maintain the Park's high standard of living requires a significant amount of resources compared to the more humble lifestyle of the Kims, but the structure of society shows how the poor must pay the price for humanity's transgressions in an unequal manner. Stairs in the film also show physical transition from large open spaces, such as the Park's mansion, to smaller, cramped, almost claustrophobic spaces, such as the Kim's semi-basement home. The physical structure of Kim's semi-basement conveys some hope. Being only partially submerged, there's potential for escape. but the camera work and the set design shows the walls almost caving in and trapping the Kims in their situation. It's a sort of metaphor showing how in capitalistic societies, the equal opportunities for all is a bit of an illusion, and escape is not possible with us all being stratified in society and trapped almost. In the domestication of the human species, anthropologist Peter Wilson argues that architecture allows us to conceptualize reality clearly and helps societies form systems that explain their culture and social practices. Parasite takes its concept to a new level, with social classes being quite literally presented on an almost continuous staircase. While it explains the strict rules of social stratification in a physical manner, it never really justifies it. And Boon Junho, encourages us to ponder on this concept. The scene builds on a pattern of introducing more disturbing and uncomfortable visuals, which build up to a crescendo in the garden party massacre scene. It involves a rich Park couple performing acts of non-penetrative sex, and it is revealed that Mrs. Park is wearing a cheap pair of panties that were left in their Mercedes by the Kims in order to have their previous driver fired. The Parks take the bait and hypothesize that their previous driver had drugged and raped a woman in their car, projecting a sort of sexual fantasy. They immediately turn to stereotyping the poor underclass as people who have criminal tendencies and not to be trusted. Even sex is kind of corrupted for them. It's involving drugs and violence, and the Parks kind of fetishize this in order to fulfill their sexual needs. The stereotyping is aligned with something else that the Parks are complicit of: othering. Through smell, Mr. Park states how his new driver, Key-Tank, has a strange stench, a semi-basement stench. And throughout the movie, the Park's reaction to the Kims' smell becomes more exaggerated, which is a physical repulsion closely aligned to Mr. Park's mantra that his employees not overstep the line, a phrase he almost repeats religiously. And it is the core of his mantra that, at the surface level, it kind of seems that the statement shows his desire to maintain professionalism even in his domestic life, but coupled with his repulsion of his employees, which shows through his dislike of their smell, exemplifies his desire to delineate himself as essentially different in nature to his employees. In her work on Purity and Danger, Mary Douglas argues that there is no such thing as absolute dirt. Dirt offends order. And furthermore, in this work, she talks about how humans understand the world around them by dividing them into binary categories. Mr. Park subscribes to this rationale, creating a world in which people belong to the elite or working class. Considering Douglas's opinion, the existence of the smell itself must be questioned. Does the smell actually exist, or is it just a representation of the Park's subconscious reaction and fear to the Kims' attempts to raise their own class and cross the sacred boundary? Kiwu's wealthier, more successful university friend gives him a scholar's stone, which in many East Asian cultures is said to bring good fortune upon to those who was gifted. Kiwu is, of course, the son in the Kim family, and he is the first one to get a tutoring job with the Park family, which is given to him by his university friend. Before considering the scholar's stone itself, it's important to discuss two concepts. Jim McGuigan coined the term cool capitalism, which he states is fundamental in translating the disaffection of capitalism, particularly the inequality that it generates, into acceptance and compliance among the masses. Cool is the front region of capitalism today for those who aspire, mostly in frustration, to the greatest fruits of capitalist civilization. For capitalism to command hearts and minds, it is necessary to mask out its much less appealing back region. And this is what Jim McGuigan says on cool capitalism. This back region is the exploitation of the working class and the unequal distribution of resources that is essential in preserving the Park's way of life. The Kims, who are part of this less appealing back region, in spite of their subjugation, have some sort of reverence for the Parks and their financial success, and they aspire to lift their own socioeconomic standing. The concept of how cool capitalism enables the masking of injustice, in this case the means of production in capitalist societies, is closely linked to the Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci's theory of cultural hegemony, which essentially discusses how consent is given up by subordinate classes to the general direction imposed upon social life by the dominant fundamental group. This consent is given due to the prestige the dominant class enjoys because of its position in the world of production. And this is just a quote taken from Gramsci's published works. The Kims consent to their destitute. The Kims consent to their destitute condition by this principle, as social concepts like cool capitalism encourage conformity to consumerism and impact their agency. So the stone becomes a physical representation of the allure of cool capitalism and class aspirations of betterment. Socially held beliefs like cool capitalism, or in a more colloquial sense, get rich fast, impacts the actions of the characters and therefore their agency. The Scholar's Stone and the concept it represents propel the Kims to do anything, even killing Moon Guang to get to the top. However, from the fighting scene between the Kim family and Gyunse and Moon Guang, it's not really a fight to get to the top, but rather a fight to stay from the bottom. And as the movie goes on, we literally see how Kiwoo is unable to let go of the viewing stone, which he closely associates with a better future for his family. And it quite literally shows how these social beliefs are affecting his agency, in this case, quite literally to be able to let go of the stone. And it shows how these beliefs are so embedded within us that we are unable to break free, and it dictates our agency.
Now, the position of Moon Guang. Moon Guang was, as mentioned earlier at the beginning, she was the maid of the Park family. Now, the Kim family, as we know, they managed to get rid of the Moon Guang and kicked her out, and managed to get hold of the household, the housemaid job. But the way they did this, they got rid of Moon Guang, was that they made Mrs. Park believe that she had actually tuberculosis. And the way they did it was they actually exported the fact that Moon Guang had allergies to peaches, and they brought peaches into the house, and Moon Guang started coughing, and then they literally put some color on a tissue paper in the bin and made Mrs. Park see that, and Mrs. Park just assumed that she had definitely TB. Now, Mrs. Park, from the very beginning, we've seen that she's really concerned about the safety of her children. So one can argue that she actually fired Moon Guang because she was worried that the children could actually catch the disease. However, Moon Guang clearly did not have any idea of what a TB actually is. Although like TB is a really infectious disease, and it has like severe consequences for the children and elderly, but for someone to be diagnosed with TB, if you want to diagnose them with cough, you would have to have the cough for like a long time, at least 2-3 months. And to actually diagnose someone, you have to have laboratory tests like sputum test or something to look for the bacteria in there. However, Mrs. Park did not do any of these things, and she just assumed that she has it. Now, it actually points to the fact that she might have a stigma related to TB, and this is really important because stigma is shaped by institutional and community norms and interpersonal attitudes, which is different to discrimination, and it's actually a really important determinant of health. Now, in this case, the cause of discrimination is unknown, and according to many authors, the discrimination the stigma related to TB is most likely due to the contagious nature or the route of contamination of this disease. However, as we already saw, that Mrs. Park did not have any idea about the disease, so she clearly could have been have had stigma against TB because of a lack of knowledge. Now, the thing is, the problem with the stigma with TB is that even though people with a good knowledge of the TB, of the transmission of TB, also have have stigma to TB. Now, the important aspect with TB stigma is as we see in case of Moon Guang, she lost her job, and that's actually one of the most common cause of this TB stigma is actually isolation and economic losses. And in one sense, you could actually think that Mrs. Park actually kicked out Moon Guang. Maybe she was concerned about her own social status as well, because she might have thought that if I get TB as well, my husband would start treating me differently. To finish off the analysis, we just want to focus on the class culture. The film is set in South Korea, which is a very monoethnic nation with about approximately 96% of the population being native ethnic Koreans. As foreign viewers, we are therefore immediately introduced to striking similarities and more subtle differences between our culture and modern-day Korean culture. Class tensions are the main focus of this film, and Bong Joon-ho does this through juxtaposing the Park family and Kim family and exploiting their relationship. Culture of the working class is in the work of Douglas E. Foley states that the working class is a direct set of what anthropologists would call expressive cultural practices, for example, talking, eating, joking, storytelling, singing, dancing, etc. They have a distinct lifestyle and way of living and expressing themselves that is not bourgeoisie. And throughout the film, Bong explores this through giving us scenes of Kim family in their semi-basement and places of congregation like a restaurant. Their language is entwined with cuss words and mannerism, and essentially different from the Parks, who must maintain formality and superficiality at all times. Even the Kim food is more hearty and taken with plenty of alcohol together. It paints a vivid picture of South Korean working class culture. Foley describes the work of another sociologist, Willis, who argues that as the working class culture develops socialist and political organization, it wages an ideological struggle with the hegemony of bourgeoisie. What Willis is saying, as the working class becomes more aware of their subjugation, they begin to question the cultural hegemony of the upper class. In the second half of the movie, it shows the Kims now become more self-aware of their disenfranchisement through a succession of scenes showing them struggle to perform their domestic jobs, which they previously loved and were grateful for Ki Woo. This quiet rebellion against the cultural hegemony established by the ruling class takes a violent turn when Ki Tak finally breaks and stabs Dong Ek in the garden party massacre scene. Thank you so much, guys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send your questions.